August 2014, Bulgaria. On the set of The Expendables 3, a truck weighing more than 3,000 kilograms shot off the edge of a pier and crashed straight into the Black Sea. Inside that sinking monster of metal was Jason Statham himself. Not a double, not a trick. The real man. For 40 long seconds, everyone above the surface froze. The crew screamed his name, but the only sound Jason heard was the roar of water swallowing light. This was no scene from a movie. It was real life. The former British diver who once missed his Olympic dream was suddenly back in the water, fighting not for a medal, but for air. They say heroes are born from fire, but Jason's legend was forged underwater. From the cold markets of Shirebrook to the ocean floor of Bulgaria, he had spent his life battling gravity, pain, and time itself. And now even the sea tried to stop him. What happened next would change how the world saw Jason Statham forever. If you believe true strength is not about never falling, but rising again when the world holds you down, hit subscribe. And if you are ready to hear his story, comment the number 1 right now. Let's go back to where it all began. July 26, 1967. Shirebrook, Derbyshire, a small mining town in the north of England where the air was thick with smoke and the night smelled of coal. That's where Jason Statham was born, in a world that demanded toughness before tenderness. His mother, Eileen, was a dancer whose applause faded as quickly as it came. His father, Barry, did every job a man could to keep food on the table. He mined coal when the sun rose, painted walls when it set, and sang in pubs when the lights went out. Their home was small, walls stained with time, the kitchen bulb flickering like it was running out of hope. But inside that flicker lived something unbreakable. Jason and his older brother Lee grew up surrounded by the rhythm of work and worry. By the time he was 8, Jason was already following his father through the open markets of Great Yarmouth, selling fake perfume and cheap watches to strangers who rarely looked him in the eye. The smell of rain and metal mixed with the sound of his father's voice calling out deals. It wasn't just about earning money. It was about learning survival. Barry didn't teach his son how to be tough. He showed him every single day. At 12, while most boys were chasing footballs across muddy fields, Jason was chasing something else. Motion, discipline, balance. He found it in the cold water of the Crystal Palace National Sports Centre in London. That pool became his second home, a silent world where strength had to be earned, not shouted. He trained until his hands cracked and his muscles screamed. Long after the other divers had gone home, Jason stayed, diving again and again into water so cold it felt like glass. Each splash was a promise that one day he would rise higher. The odds were brutal. Most professional divers started training at 5. Jason was 7 years late, but he refused to quit. By 17, he was competing with the best in Britain. By 23, he represented England in the Commonwealth Games. 3 times he stood on those tall platforms, 10 meters above the water, where a single heartbeat decided between glory and failure. Then came 1992, the Olympic trials. After 10 years of sacrifice, he missed the British team by 1 spot. Just 1. 10 years reduced to silence. Jason didn't curse or cry. He simply watched the surface of the pool calm, as if it were erasing his name. That silence stayed with him. It carved discipline into his bones. It taught him that success is a visitor, but resilience is a home. He left the pool, but not the fight. The boy from Shirebrook who once dove into freezing water would one day dive headfirst into life itself. And every stunt, every punch, every fall that made the world cheer began right there in that small town, in that cold water, with a boy who refused to sink. When Jason Statham stepped away from the diving board, there was no sound of applause waiting for him. No cameras, no medals, no headlines. The world simply kept turning while he fell behind. He was 25, broke, and invisible in a city that never slowed down. London in the early 1990s was a storm without shelter. The rain came sideways. The cold lived in the walls, and hunger had an address on every street corner. Jason rented tiny rooms that smelled of rust and damp air. He slept in his clothes because the radiator was dead. The wallpaper peeled like skin. The floors creaked, and the only light came from a weak bulb that hummed above the bed. He had gone from diving for England to selling fake perfume on Oxford Street. For 12 hours a day, he stood on the pavement, holding out bottles that promised a better life. £5, best smell in London. He would shout to people who never turned their heads. Some ignored him, some laughed. One man once threw a bottle back at him. It shattered on the ground, and Jason just looked at it. Then he picked up another bottle and kept going. He was not proud of it, but he refused to quit. Later, he would say that he sold what he had because he would never steal what he did not. His hands were cold, but his pride stayed hot. Every coin that hit his palm was proof he was still standing. London taught him more than any coach ever had. It taught him how to fall quietly and get up without noise. It taught him that dignity is not about what you have, but what you protect inside yourself. At night, when the markets closed and the streets emptied, Jason trained. No gym, no coach, just his body and his will. Push-ups beside the bed until his arms trembled. Shadowboxing in the mirror until sweat ran like rain down his chest. He was fighting ghosts, the diver he used to be and the man he wanted to become. Between 1993 and 1996, he lived one day at a time, selling watches, cheap jewelry, small dreams. He walked through crowds like a ghost made of stubbornness. The city did not see him, but fate did. One afternoon, while training again at the Crystal Palace Sports Center, the same pool that once defined him, someone noticed. An agent from sports promotions saw a face that looked carved out of hardship. They were searching for real athletes with rough edges, not polished smiles. A week later, Jason stood in front of a camera for the first time. He modeled for brands like Tommy Hilfiger, Levi's, and French Connection. The pay was small, only a few £100s, but it felt like a spark in a long tunnel of dark. Still, that fame did not follow. Between photo shoots, he went right back to the streets. Years later, he laughed about it, saying he was just a hustler doing what he had to do. Behind the grin, there was truth. The streets that once broke him were quietly shaping him. Then came 1998. A young director named Guy Ritchie was preparing his first film, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. He wanted real people for his story, not trained actors. Someone from French Connection told him about Jason, the ex-diver with the hustler's eyes. When they met, Guy did not see a model, though. He saw survival. Jason did not audition. He talked. He told stories about corners of London, about deals gone wrong, about nights that smelled of rain and fear. Ritchie listened and then said simply, "You are the man." The role paid £5,000. It might as well have been $1 million. For Jason, it was the moment everything shifted. When the film was released, critics called it raw and electric. What they did not realize was that Jason was not acting at all. He was confessing. In one scene, he stands behind a table selling stolen goods. Quick hands, sharp eyes, calm voice. That was not a character. That was Oxford Street. Every insult, every long day, turned into art. The movie earned $28 million on a $1 million budget. Overnight, the man who once begged strangers to stop and listen had the world watching. Guy Ritchie later said that Jason did not act in that film. He remembered. Jason understood what that meant. Every moment of silence, every lost dream, every bruise from the streets had been training for this was. The pool taught him discipline. The markets taught him persistence. Together, they created the kind of strength that could not be faked under lights. He had learned the truth. Success does not come when someone discovers you. It comes when you are ready to be seen. The world had finally looked his way, and when it did, it saw a man who did not need to pretend to be strong. He already was. The year was 2000, and Jason Statham was 33, the same age his father had been when he first sang in a smoky pub for coins. Only now the sun was standing under bright lights, not bar lights. Guy Ritchie had called him again. this time for Snatch, alongside Brad Pitt and Benicio del Toro. The movie exploded at the box office, making more than $80 million. Jason had gone from selling fake watches to standing next to Hollywood royalty in only 2 years. But fame is never as shiny as it looks from far away. The same streets that built him had also hardened him. When others celebrated with champagne, he trained. When others asked for body doubles, he refused. His rule was simple. If his name was in the credits, the bruises had to be his. In 2002 came The Transporter. It was the film that made him a global star. He trained for months before cameras rolled, mastering Wing Chun, kickboxing, and Krav Maga. Every kick, every punch, every fall on screen was real. He dove through glass, fought on moving vehicles, rolled down stairs until his skin burned. When the director offered him a stuntman, he smiled and said, "If I get hurt, at least it is honest." By the time filming ended, he had torn a ligament in his shoulder and cracked 2 ribs. He laughed it off, icing his wounds between takes, hiding pain behind that calm stare. Critics called him the new face of real action cinema. But the truth was simpler. He was a man who could not separate performance from survival. The success was blinding. Crank, War, Death Race, The Bank Job, each film louder, faster, more dangerous. Between 2002 and 2010, he filmed almost 2 movies every year. He flew between continents, slept in hotel rooms that all smelled the same, trained by day and fought on camera by night. He once said that he woke up bruised and went to bed broken, but did it again the next morning because that was who he was. The injuries piled up. A compressed spine, torn ligaments, nerve pain that ran down his arms like electricity. His doctors warned him to slow down. He smiled and said that stopping was not in the script. Then came The Expendables in 2010, standing beside Sylvester Stallone, Jet Li, and Dolph Lundgren. Jason was no longer the new guy. He was one of them, a real action hero in a world that had traded blood for CGI. He was proud of that. Every punch, every scrum, every bead of sweat on that set was earned. The movie made over $270 million, but what it took from his body could not be counted. A year later, in 2011, during the filming of The Expendables 2, tragedy struck. A stunt explosion went wrong during a scene on a reservoir in Bulgaria. One of the stunt team members, a young man named Kun Liu, was killed. Jason was there that day. He ran toward the smoke, shouting, searching, but found only chaos. When it was over, he stood by the water, silent. Later, when a reporter asked about the accident, he said only 3 words, "We lost one." That silence said everything. It changed him. He started calling stunts by a different name, risks paid in blood. From that moment, every time the cameras rolled, he took a quiet breath before the first take, closing his eyes for a second of respect. It was his way of remembering that behind every explosion there was always a man who might not come back. Then in 2014, history repeated itself. During the Expendables 3 rehearsal, Jason was behind the wheel of a truck weighing more than 3 tons. The brakes failed. The truck crashed through a barrier and plunged into the Black Sea. In seconds, it was gone. Jason was trapped inside, sinking fast. His instincts as a former national diver took over. He kicked the door, fought against the weight, and somehow made it to the surface. When he climbed out, shaking, Stallone called it a miracle in real life. Later, when asked how he felt, Jason said quietly that it should have been over. But the next morning he showed up to set, bruised and silent, ready to film again. It was that moment that drew the line between acting and existence. Jason had faced danger so many times on screen that death had finally answered back, and he had survived it. Hollywood called him the last of the real ones. Sylvester Stallone said that if he had been born in another era, Jason would have been a gladiator. But the truth was more human. Jason was a man who carried ghosts. The ghost of the diver who fell short of the Olympics, the ghost of the friend lost to an explosion, the ghost of his own near death in the sea. All of them followed him to every set, every fight, every quiet hotel room. He kept going, not because he loved pain, but because he trusted it. Pain was honest. It never lied, never faked, never pretended to care. It reminded him he was still alive. By the end of the decade, he had built a legacy worth more than $100 million. But he never measured it in money. He measured it in scars. Jason Statham had become the iron heart of modern cinema, the man who turned bruises into box office, the last warrior of flesh and bone in a world of green screens. And behind every perfect punch was the truth no audience could see. Every explosion ends in silence. And in that silence, Jason Statham remembers the ones who never got back up. The year was 2000. Toughness. Jason Statham was standing at the edge of a new life. Snatch had made him famous overnight, and the man who once slept in cold London flats was now walking red carpets under flashing lights. But fame, like fire, doesn't warm for long. It burns. That same year, he met Kelly Brook, one of Britain's most photographed women, a model and actress with the kind of smile that made cameras stop. For a while, they were the perfect picture. London nights, premieres, laughter that sounded like forever. Jason was 30, Kelly was 21, and for a moment the world seemed kind. But Hollywood moves faster than love can breathe. By 2004, Kelly had fallen for actor Billy Zane while filming in South Africa. The tabloids turned it into a circus. Jason didn't fight back. He didn't chase headlines or make statements. He simply went quiet. Later, he called it the pain of being replaced while you were still loyal. That heartbreak didn't break him. It hardened him. He buried himself in work, filming The Transporter 2, training harder than ever, punching until his knuckles split. Friends said he smiled less that year. He learned to hide pain behind motion. By 2005, another spark appeared. Sophie Monk, the Australian pop star turned actress, was 26, full of light and mischief. They met in Los Angeles, where she was chasing music and he was chasing purpose. She called him the hardest man to love, not because he didn't care, but because he carried the world in silence. Their laughter was loud, their fights louder. They burned bright and fast. A year later, distance tore them apart. Sophie stayed in Hollywood. Jason kept moving. In 2007, he met Alex Zosman, a London model and interior designer. She wasn't fame or fire. She was quiet, calm. The first person who didn't want the movie star, she wanted the man. For 3 years, she grounded him. Mornings in their London flat smelled of coffee, not cameras. Nights were quiet. Jason would come home from sets covered in bruises, and she would patch him up without asking how it happened. But the life he lived was built on departures. The bank job, Transporter 3, Death Race, The Expendables. He was in Bangkok one week, Los Angeles the next. Love needs presence, and presence was the one thing Jason could not give. In 2010, they quietly ended things. No drama, no blame, just exhaustion. He once said that everyone wanted the actor, but no one saw the man. Behind that sentence lived years of loneliness hidden under success. Then, in 2010, fate softened its grip. At a party in London, Jason met Rosie Huntington-Whiteley, a 23-year-old model and rising star in the fashion world. She was half his age, but there was something timeless about her calm. While others chased his fame, she noticed his silence. They began with coffee instead of champagne, late-night walks through Notting Hill instead of red carpets. Rosie saw the man who didn't talk much, and Jason saw the woman who didn't need him to. By 2016, they were engaged. The ring wasn't massive or loud. It was simple, like the promise they made, to build something real in a world made of illusions. In June 2017, their son Jack Oscar was born. Jason was 49 then, and for the first time in decades, he wasn't running toward danger. He was running home. He held his son and said softly that this was the only fight he never wanted to win. But fame never forgets your address. In 2017, while filming The Fate of the Furious, Jason spent months away on location. Rosie stayed home, balancing motherhood and her own career. He missed Jack's first steps. He watched the first birthday candles blow out through a phone screen. Rosie didn't complain. She left notes in his suitcase. 3 words written again and again. Come home soon. Into their second child arrived, a daughter named Isabella James. Jason was 55. When he held her for the first time, he said the world suddenly made sense again. He had built an empire out of scars, but now he had something softer to protect. Today, Jason and Rosie live mostly in London, far from the noise of Hollywood. Their mornings smell of pancakes and crayons. Their nights hum with laughter instead of engines. He trains in the backyard while Jack mimics his punches. Rosie calls him the calm in every storm. He calls her home. He no longer chases premieres or headlines. The man who once jumped through explosions now guards bedtime stories. The fighter who never backed down now kneels to tie his son's shoes. In private interviews, Jason still laughs about his old life. He says he's done chasing speed because the only race that matters now is time. He talks about balance, the same thing his father once taught him in the markets. The lesson never changed. Life is about keeping your footing, no matter how hard the wind blows. He has lived through betrayal, distance, and fame's loneliness. But Rosie and their children gave him something he never had before, a reason to be still. After years of motion, he found peace in quiet rooms filled with love. And if you ask him what matters most now, he doesn't mention cars, money, or movies. He simply says, family. Because in the end, Jason Statham learned that strength isn't about how hard you fight. It's about who you fight for. The year was 2025. Jason Statham was 58 years old. His hair had turned silver at the edges. His body carried the memory of every fight, every fall, every bone that ever screamed back at him. But when he walked onto a film set, you could still feel that same fire. Smaller maybe, but unbroken. He once said, half joking, that he used to fight villains and now he fights gravity. And maybe that was the truest thing he ever said. He wakes up before sunrise. No alarms, no trainers shouting, just habit, boxing gloves, a cold shower, a simple breakfast of eggs, green vegetables, and tea. He still trains every day, boxing, swimming, yoga, calisthenics. He doesn't do it for cameras anymore. He does it because stillness feels too close to death. He often says that you don't stop moving because you get old. You get old because you stop moving. From the outside, his life looks like victory written in gold. A net worth of more than $100 million. 3 mansions scattered between London, Beverly Hills, and Malibu. Cars worth more than most people's houses. Aston Martins, Ferraris, a McLaren 720S that purrs like a storm waiting to happen. But step inside any of his homes, and you'll see something surprising. Silence, simplicity, not a shrine to fame, but a workshop of peace. His London home sits near Kensington, wide glass windows, a koi pond that hums quietly outside, walls lined with books instead of awards. Mornings smell like pancakes and crayons. His son Jack, now 7, races toy cars across the living room. His daughter Isabella, 3 years old, tries to catch sunlight with her hands. Rosie, his wife, moves through the house with calm precision. She calls him the calm in every storm. He calls her home. When Jason steps into the backyard gym, he trains alone, but not in silence. The laughter of his children drifts through the open door. Every sound reminds him of what he almost lost, the warmth that fame nearly stole. He no longer chases premieres or red carpets. He avoids interviews unless they have purpose. Privacy, he told Esquire, is our peace. Yet even peace carries its ghosts. Some nights, after the family has gone to bed, Jason stands quietly in the doorway, watching them sleep. The porch light glows like a promise that home will always wait. But deep down, he knows how fragile it all is. He has seen how fast life can end in a second, with one explosion, one mistake, one breath too late. He has lived through too many silences after too many storms to take peace for granted. He still donates quietly, writing checks no one sees, programs for young divers, martial arts schools, foundations for stunt performers who risk their lives for scenes the audience forgets. He once said that someone gave him a chance when he had none, and now it's his turn to hand that forward. He rarely talks about fame. When he does, it sounds more like a confession than a celebration. He says that success is loud, but meaning is quiet. Jason's cars, his houses, his bank account, none of it define him now. What defines him is the stillness after motion, the quiet after the explosion. He knows the cost of everything he's built: torn ligaments, broken bones, sleepless nights, lost friends. He's a millionaire built from bruises. There's an irony in his life. The man who spent decades crashing cars on screen now drives slowly through London streets, his daughter singing in the back seat. The man who used to train to survive now trains to stay alive for them. Sylvester Stallone once called him the last real action hero. And maybe that's true. He's one of the few left who did it all for real, who bled for every frame. But Jason never calls himself a hero. He calls himself lucky. Lucky to still be standing when so many didn't make it. In quiet moments, he sometimes goes back to the water. Not the Black Sea where death nearly found him, but the calm blue pools of London. He'll swim slow laps, steady and rhythmic, like a man revisiting an old friend. The water doesn't scare him anymore. It listens. He's learned something most men never do. Strength isn't about how much you can take. It's about how much you can give while still standing. It's about walking through fire and coming out with enough left to hold someone else's hand. Now, when Jason looks back at his life, it feels less like a movie and more like a series of second chances. The boy from Shirebrook who sold perfume on the streets became the man who built an empire from scars. The diver who missed the Olympics learned to fly in another way. The hustler who once chased strangers for attention now protects his family from it. He doesn't chase fame anymore. He protects meaning. He doesn't shout success. He lives it quietly, in laughter, in love, in legacy. And maybe that's what makes Jason Statham truly unbreakable. Not the punches he threw or the stunts he survived, but the way he learned to keep his heart steady after the noise stopped. As the London sky turns pale at dawn, Jason stands by the window, watching the city wake. The world still sees him as steel, but inside he knows the truth. Steel bends, steel rusts. What lasts forever is resolve. Jason Statham isn't just the man who survived Hollywood. He's the man who learned how to live after it. When you look at Jason Statham's story from beginning to end, it isn't just the tale of an action star. It's the journey of a man who turned survival into purpose. From selling fake perfume on the streets of London to surviving a real crash into the Black Sea. Every chapter of his life whispers the same truth. Pain does not define you. It refines you. He never waited for the world to hand him anything. He built everything from sweat, silence, and second chances. And maybe that's the lesson for all of us watching. You don't need perfect timing. You need persistence. You don't need applause. You need hunger. Because greatness doesn't come from talent alone. It comes from the courage to keep moving when no one is watching. Jason's story reminds us that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the foundation of it. The boy who missed the Olympics didn't give up. He just found another stage. The man who almost drowned in the Black Sea didn't walk away. He showed up to set the next morning. That's not luck. That's discipline, heart, and faith in motion. He teaches us that real strength is not loud. It doesn't need to scream to be seen. Real strength is quiet. It's the hand that steadies, the breath that returns, the heart that forgives. It's what remains after the applause fades. So if you've watched this far, take a second to think about your own fight. The battles no one knows you're fighting. The quiet victories no one claps for. That's where character is born. That's where you become unstoppable. And if you're still here with me right now, If you've felt something in this story, drop a #1 in the comments. Let me know you made it to the end. Don't forget to hit subscribe because more stories like this one are coming. Stories about people who didn't just chase fame, but chased meaning. People who remind us that no matter where you start, you can rise again. Jason Statham's life isn't about being indestructible. It's about choosing to rise every single time you fall. And maybe that's what being truly alive means. Alive means. Alive means. Alive means.